Have you ever applauded for 5 minutes straight? Yeah, me neither. But apparently it's normal in the Hunger Games universe. You'd think it would hurt your hand after a while. Today, let's talk about how being too specific with time can actually break your reader's immersion. Before I well and truly zero in on the Hunger Games, look at these example phrases. Which one do you think would be best to use in a novel? A few moments later, 5 minutes later, or in the time that it took to boil an egg. I'd most often pick the first one, and I know it's vague, but here's why. The other two are definitely more specific and more creative, and neither is wrong, by the way, but by being more specific, you can trap yourself. If you don't get the timings absolutely right, it can make the reader think too much about how you wrote the book and distract them from what's actually going on. I see this in my editing work all the time, and I do it too when I write, especially with plottier stories. It's really easy to back ourselves into a corner with time when there might not really be any need to, which I think is what happened in Hunger Games. In chapter 27, the main characters are in a kind of victory presentation for the winners of the games, and here's what it says as they take the stage. Haymitch's appearance brings a round of applause and stomping that goes on for at least 5 minutes. What do you think when you read that? Yes, this world is flamboyant and sort of superficial and celebrity obsessed, so maybe. But 5 minutes? Have you ever applauded for more than 1 minute straight? This is what I mean. I'm now thinking too much about that and not enough about Haymitch taking the stage. I'll show you how I would fix this without changing the overall vibe of the scene in a second, but did this have the same effect on you as it did on me? Because I'm willing to accept it could just be me being a fussy editor. You'll have to let me know in the comments. The easiest way to avoid knocking the reader out of the story like this is to be less specific about it. And there's loads of ways you could go here, but I think just reducing it down and making it a bit more vague works fine. A round of applause and stomping that goes on for at least a couple of minutes. That seems okay to me. It still emphasises the crowd's reaction, but it's a bit more grounded in reality. The thing is, I'm not the kind of editor that wants to change things about a writer's story when I don't really need to, though. So maybe we can actually keep that crazy 5 minutes number. This scene is all from Katniss, the main character's perspective. That 5 minute approximation is hers. So why not emphasise that instead, while bailing ourselves out of being too specific at the same time? A round of applause and stomping that goes on for what feels like at least 5 minutes. It's almost the same in language as the original here. The slight difference just makes the, to me, unrealistic detail of 5 minutes into hyperbole from the character, who's generally impatient with this kind of nonsense anyway. That way, we avoid the issue of being too specific, but we keep the length of time, and we don't have to change much at all to do it. Minimal changes, but the issue is resolved. Now, if at this point you're thinking, Kieran, come on, it's just 5 minutes. People applaud way longer than that at the Oscars sometimes. It's not that unbelievable. Chill out. All right, fair enough. But what if I raise you another 5 minutes on top of that? Just a page later, we get to this as the injured Peter and Katniss embrace on stage in this contrived reunion. He's kissing me, and all the time I'm thinking, do you know how much danger we're in? After about 10 minutes of this, Caesar Flickerman taps on Peter's shoulder. All right, break it up, kids. But same thing here though, 10 minutes? Can you imagine kissing and hugging someone on stage, on live TV, as this is, for 10 straight minutes? This is an even harder detail to believe for me. And I know, it's a YA fantasy novel. It's not going to be wholly realistic. And who would really want it to be? I take your point there, and I do like this book, but I think it needs to be realistic enough that we don't think about it too much. So if you think I'm being overly critical, here's some context. This couple are trying to make the nation believe they're tragically in love when they're secretly not, or are they? So a long embrace at an emotional reunion, that makes sense. But 10 minutes? I don't know about that. Unless maybe this is unreliable narration too. Maybe Katniss just naturally exaggerates this kind of thing and it's part of a character. That could be possible. But I don't really see a huge pattern of that in the rest of the book, but I could definitely be wrong about that. Assuming I'm not though, how would I fix this 10 minutes thing? probably with almost the same approach as before. Only this time, instead of just telling the reader it feels like 10 minutes, we could try to show them that time passing, to slow things down with something longer like this. I won't read out the whole thing here because, admittedly, it is a bit long, but adding detail slows pace, which would echo the long period of time that we're focusing on here. This revision is by no means perfect, but it disguises that specific time length a bit. It plays into the pressure that Katniss is under, but it might be too much of a diversion from the original to add all this in though, in which case the simplest thing to do might be to just cut the time down or not mention it at all. That, I think, is the important point to remember when we're talking about all of this. When you find yourself writing out a specific number or a specific date or time, think to yourself, do I have to be specific here? Does the reader need to know it's 10 minutes, or does it just need to feel like some time's passing? If you slow down and check yourself for 7.4 seconds, check yourself for just a moment, you'll keep your readers more focused on the story instead of Googling longest standing ovation Oscars. It's 12 minutes, by the way. Sometimes it's actually better to break rules like be specific or be concise in order to improve our readers' experience. In fact, I made a whole video about authors breaking the rules for exactly this reason, so click here to watch that and find out which rules they broke if you want. If you're a rebel. Not everyone is. Thanks so much for watching as always, and happy writing.